Hello and welcome back to the Reddit League show. This week we are in week 7 and we'll be talking about the results of our plays on the diverse AI world map. And today I'm joined by Lunacy. How are you doing?
Hello, I am doing well. Just came off a really long flight itinerary and ready to talk some GeoGuessr.
All right, well we'll hope you don't fall asleep during the course of it, as it is pretty late for you. But why? I mean, after maybe you're jet lagged, maybe you can't fall asleep anyway. But
Maybe, yeah. Jet lag doesn't exist. It's a state of mind. It's a social construct.
yes, yeah, sure. All right. Unfortunately, this week we don't have any graphics for the Reddit League show because something broke in Satomo's computer and he just hasn't quite been able to fix it yet. You know, over the holiday period, he might have some more time to do so. So hopefully they're back next week. But for now, we'll have to make do with the sheet. I will zoom in a bit so people can actually see what's going on.
It's like a rebranding. It's Reddit League Show Unplugged.
Yep. The unedited, well, I don't think it'll be unedited, but you know. All right. Well, we'll start with Reddit League next, as every time, and you can really see by now there's two people running away at the top of it, with G Papa having another best of performance, first place again ahead of Secateur, and then everyone kind of scrambling for that third place behind them.
Right, yeah, it looks like just based on the totals, like there's two people who are just really, really far up there. And then the next four people are sort of close. Clemens, Serchik, and Bombadil. I mean, this is my first time doing a Reddit League show, so apologies if I'm getting some details wrong that are pretty pretty well known. They were in D5 last season, right? And have been consistently.
Bombadil has been for sure. I don't know if Clemens has been there. I think so. Both of them have been here for a while. I can't remember, the exact seasons they've been relegated, but is it really your first Reddit League show?
No, for this season.
Okay, for this, yeah, I was thinking
uh,
that can't be true.
But anyways, these a lot of the names in the top here are pretty familiar. Like I've definitely seen Clemens, Serchik, and Bombadil around quite a bit, and it's no surprise then that they're the ones sort of in the top, along with Secateur and G Papa, who may be a bit of a new name for me, but is clearly doing very, very well for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. He's been having a great time, except for that one week 6 game where he was struggling a little bit in Lithuania, but then again, who wasn't? Um,
So
And yeah,
true.
I have also now decided the number of people that will get their guaranteed spot for next season. It will be the top 3. So will be an exciting finish over the last 4 weeks on who can get into that spot. As you said,
Okay, yeah.
very close from 3rd to 6th. So it could be very interesting. Of course, even if you don't secure that guaranteed spot, you'll still be able to make it in through the preseason next season if you get a good enough score, or if there's not enough people applying for it, who knows. But yeah, I feel like that's the most reasonable decision with only 5 people getting a secured, in quotation marks, relegation from Division 5. It would feel odd if I promoted like 5 people from next, and then suddenly like no one leaves from Division 5, and then no one from preseason can go into Division 5. That would just be a bit weird. So 3 people it is. And yeah,
Yeah,
good
that
luck.
makes sense.
Good luck to everyone fighting for that 3rd spot. I think Secateur and G Papa, as long as they don't miss a week and don't do too badly on the remaining stuff, they should be pretty secure. And yeah, we'll see how they do in the last few weeks.
Yeah, it's honestly pretty impressive how consistent Clemens and Bombadil are in that they have very few like podium positions, but they have just been consistently scoring well enough and in front of the rest of the division that they're still solidly in third and fourth.
Mm,
And their scores from week 7 sort of reflect that as well. It was not the easiest seed. Some real landscape guessing required
yep,
there.
definitely. And yeah, they've been consistently doing pretty good. Is fair to say, I think. All right, then let's move on to the results of Division 5 as I scroll down to them. And we'll start with Division 5B, which are these. And yeah, I don't think there was too much surprising, I suppose. The big favorites so far this season, Danny Blondes and Mr. Swiss Snow, have both won their games with relatively decent margins. And even looking at all the other results, there's not too much that was particularly close. We had No against Cephalin with just 182 points, dividing the two of them, and a bonus point for Cephalin as well, who continues to be rather unlucky with his matchups. But I think everything else pretty much went the way you could have expected it to go.
Yeah, a little bit, perhaps a little bit disappointing for Sethlin, given that they have a pretty high score, but Arno just coming in clutch there at the end. It also looks like from the table too that Arno, Penguin, like they're they're sort of like in the running to potentially for some kind of promotion. So the fact that they're winning their games and staying consistent is probably pretty good. Other than that, I think you're right that these seem to be sort of the expected results for this division. Excited to see Danny Blonde's finally like it looks like this might be Danny Blonde's season after spending ages in D5. You know, promotion time might be soon.
Yeah, well, let's take a look at that table. Yeah, it does look pretty good for him. He's still in second place with 18 points, but there is 4 weeks still to go. And I mean, Pelena in third, same amount of points, and even the aforementioned Anon Penguin are pretty close by, so he can't afford any slip ups for sure. He's done very well so far. Has the highest total score as well by over 3,000 points, ahead of Mr. Swiss Snow. So yeah, looking good finally.
Yeah, this table does look pretty interesting. Like, you know, you've got like looks like three people with what seems like a lead, but really with only 3 points separating each of these like different tiers. Really anything could happen in the next few weeks. I could totally see Arnon or Penguin coming up and like being real challengers for some of those promotion spots. And also looking at sort of the bottom part of the table, there also aren't too many points separating out some of the bottom tier. Like there's definitely it definitely feels a lot closer here than in some of the other divisions, I might say.
Yeah, interesting as well. Kuka's with 6 points despite only one win, so he's had some pretty good games and just again gotten a little unfortunate maybe with some matchups that he received bonus points 3 times out of those 6 losses. So yeah, he's definitely still in the running as well, and no one can really relax going into the rest of the season. Everyone's still fighting for something, and we'll look at their games next week. And we do see some interesting matchups again. The aforementioned Penguin and Anonono fighting against each other. Could definitely be a very important game. Danny Blondes against Pelena, same thing there. Both fighting for
Ooh,
those promotion spots at the top.
those are some very juicy games, especially given that looks like Mr. Swiss Snow is going to have an easy dub, given that Lolette has been red carded out of the season.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Also in the relegation, in fight against the relegation, Kukas against Trebliha and Corgi against Soundbite is a little bit higher up. But yeah, Cephalin against Lajej as well. Some interesting games, kind of like mid-table against relegation as well, where if the mid-table player loses against a relegation candidate, then suddenly it all gets much closer as well, and they might find themselves in that relegation fight. So it's a very important week it seems for the
Yeah,
outcome
for
of this
sure.
season.
Lots of people in matchups against other people of similar tiers, so I hope they're practicing their South America. Is all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, they better be. They very likely will need it. Um,
Mm.
yeah, let's look over to Division 5A. And mostly, yeah, I think there's actually quite a lot of surprising results there. Maybe Jack against Roddy is the only one where you could have said, well, yeah, that was pretty expected. But Strassel winning against Pikatost, Apfeloxide beating Piquet, a Greasy beating Clemu, Paranoid Android against Mr. Fish as well. Some very surprising results this week.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. I'm sure this has caused quite a few shakeups. And also, I think compared to Division 5B, The results here seem to be a lot more close together, and yet we still don't see any ties, although there are lots of pairs that could potentially have tied had they been next to each other.
Yeah, absolutely. No bonus points as well, which just shows that apparently, some very fair matchups for once this week where the top six won their games and the bottom six lost their games, which, is just nice to see occasionally. And yeah, let's look at that table. And yeah, quite a bit of movement. Jack at the top on his own now after Mr. Fish's loss with 19 points. And yeah, behind him, though, everything, again, still very close together, even down to, Paranoid Android in 8th is only 4 points behind Greasy in 3rd. So with, again, 4 weeks to go, even Damir in 10th technically still has a chance to make it to those promotion spots.
Yeah, it seems like it's very hard to sort of split this division into tiers like it might have been for 5B, at least based on this week's the results from this week's games. It just seems like sort of from second all the way perhaps down to even 10th, you might say. It's just like there's just a couple pegs separating each group. And with, of course, 3 points on the line, potentially even more, around 3 points on the line for each win each week. I could still see some big shakeups happening, especially since like look at all those arrows, clearly some shakeups have happened this week, and it's well, who knows what might happen next week.
Yeah, absolutely. And Strassel as well with his second win in a row now. So even he's making ways towards, not getting direct relegation. So there's still hope left for him too. And yeah, as you said it, let's take a look at those games for next week. And I just mentioned him, Strassel against Damir. Also interesting game, 10th against 11th. Paranoid Android against Keith. I think might be 8th against 12th. So again,
Looks like it, yeah.
yeah, some close matchups at the top as well. Greasy against Jack, first against third. Upfloxeed against Mr. Fish are both, around that promotion fight. So, yeah, again, very, very important matchups this week for the overall impact on the standings.
Yeah, it looks like there's lots of good matches to watch out for. Um, if the people in the lead want to increase their lead, it doesn't seem like there are any sort of easy paths to victory this week, one might say. Given that sort of in like 5B, there were some close matches, but then you had like Swiss Snow getting like a free 3 points basically. Everyone here in this division this week is going to have to try pretty hard to score some points and make up some of that. Climb their way up the D5 ladder.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll take a look at where they might get to if they manage to make that climb as we look at the results of Division 4B from last week. And we see there, unfortunately, Sheldon with a yellow card, not playing his game on time, not able to play his game on time. And that gives Seppo a free win, free points. And other than that, mostly, I mean, there were a lot of close games initially, so it, doesn't feel right to say expected wins. Maybe a bit of a surprise, Mick winning against Jake, and Pastetli losing the game against Ollie. Not a surprise, really, in a way that, you would have absolutely expected someone to win in this game. But Pastetli has been having a pretty great season so far, so will be taken back a bit by that loss against Ollie.
Yeah, and honestly, it seems like there are a number of matches where some of the people who are sort of high up in the division might have faced some disappointment, like Sheldon not being able to play, Jake with a loss there, Pashtetli with a loss there. Like a lot of the people who were top in the standings pretty early on this season seem to be slipping just a little bit. So either maybe getting less consistent or maybe just a little bit unlucky. Who knows? But what that means is that there's lots of room for people sort of mid-table and even bottom table to shake things up still.
Yeah, and as we had it in Division 5A as well, I think, no bonus points for anyone here. And yeah, the Division 4 seed generally was, one of those seeds that you don't really like to see, where 4 of the rounds were very easy, and it just had one pretty difficult round in Sri Lanka. which is why you see so many close results there, because obviously, it's, you're obviously in Sri Lanka, but finding the exact place is tricky. So you see a lot of people dropping like 100, 200, 300 points, which explains those differences between our players here.
Yeah, and unfortunately, like a lot of, after talking to a lot of people who played this Division 4 seed, it does seem like there was maybe a little bit more luck involved than you might like, given that it was basically one round that determined the entire thing, as well as perhaps some misinformation that some people might have been lucky to avoid in the area.
Okay, I didn't hear anything about the misinformation, but I did get to cast Mikpit against Jake, which will come out later this week, I assume. And there was definitely information there to find the correct spots that I think Jake just went past. But yeah, just that's always a bit unfortunate if it just comes down to one round. It was the third round as well, and then if you dropped a lot of points there, or some points at least, you might be thinking, okay, there's 2 more rounds left. I can still make those points up. And there were 2 very easy rounds in Palestine, which just a bit annoying while playing. Where you're like, no one's dropping any points on this, are they? No, not really. So yeah.
Yeah, this might have been the seed in D4 this season so far with the highest number of 5Ks on average. I don't have the data, but that's what I might imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking through this. You had the week 5 seed. What was that? Was that Virginia, I think, which had like 8 people scoring above 24,990 in every division. But apart from that, probably, yeah. So let's take a look at the impact of that on the standings, and probably biggest impact there is something, a matchup we haven't talked about earlier, which is Dromi winning against Laban Greb, which increases the gap between Laban and the relegation playoff spots to 5 points. And with only 2 games left, he is in a pretty precarious situation there.
Yeah, this is one of the smaller divisions, and what that means is that Laban Greb needs to win these next 2 matches, and he also needs either Dromi or Junekason or both to miss both of their games or have some pretty bad weeks. So this is going to be a bit of a pickle for Laban Greb. It's not mathematically impossible, but things aren't looking too good, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the top, on the other hand, everything's still incredibly close together. First to 7th, just 4 points separating them. So still really everything possible for everyone here. Might be actually mathematically impossible for someone like Sheldon to get first, just because of, players above him playing against each other, and someone is going to get points. But definitely a promotion playoff spot is still on the cards for anyone here in the top 7.
Yeah, especially given that the top 3 are separated by just 1 point. Everything still seems really close. And honestly, I think in general, this division is very, very it's one of those divisions where a lot of people are at a very similar and very high skill level. Like if you look at Laban's Greb total score, it's the 5th highest in the division out of 10. He's in the top half in terms of total score, and he's sitting at the bottom in 3 points. Which maybe points to the fact that you might, this season might have needed a bit of luck, but clearly the people at the top, especially at the end of the season, will have deserved to be there, and this will have been well fought.
Yeah, there's always
yeah.
Go on, finish your sentence.
I was just going to say that makes these next 2 weeks more important than I was trying to give a good transition into the looking at the next.
All right, well,
looking at what's coming next.
I had something I wanted to say before then.
No, you should go. You should go.
I was gonna be talking about, because I did a survey this week about possible changes for next season, and I also let people comment at the bottom if they had something else to say. And one person did say they were kind of not too fond of that 1 versus 1 system, and saying it brings too much luck into it, and you could rearrange the matchups and you'd get a completely different result. And I think that is partially fair, because it's true in that you could, but is also kind of true for literally every other sport that kind of has 1 versus 1 matchups. It just is easier visible in Geoguessr because you can see everyone's scores and everyone is kind of playing the same map, the same seeds. But it's really no different in something like football, for example, as well, where, if you had played the big team in the league at some other day when maybe some of the players were injured, or maybe in a situation where they just lost big and their morale is down or something like that, the result might have gone completely different. And that's kind of the way in a lot of these sports as well, and is also true for GeoGuessr in a way, because if you've had good matchups so far and been lucky and suddenly find yourself in a first or second place, you might be playing a lot more relaxed, and you might have a completely different result on like the same seed just because you're in a different mindset. And that's why I think, while it is a fair concern, I don't think you can just kind of go, well, if I had played against him in that week and against him in that week, then I suddenly would have been first instead of fourth. Because there's just too many factors that play into it. And the other thing is, what was the other thing? I just thought of something and forgot about it immediately. Yeah, it's kind of, if you win all of your weeks, you're going to be first. And if you lose all of your weeks, you're going to be 10th. And everything in between there is just going to have a little bit of variety in it. And as much as people sometimes don't want to hear it because it kind of goes against the whole competitive sense, you never really want the end result to be exactly the same as the skill level of the players, because then you don't have to play. You can just be like, okay, he's better than him, so he's going to finish first. Why are we even playing the games? So that's kind of also partially a reason why you want a little bit of randomness in a competition, because otherwise it would be boring. And
That's interesting, and I've never considered that last bit before, but that's like that does make a lot of sense, you know.
yeah, it's kind of the, otherwise as well, even in if you were thinking about some of the recent seasons, with the Raidman and Boxer domination and stuff like that, if there is no randomness whatsoever, then why even play? If you're like a player who's at the sort of mid tier in Division 1, and you're like, well, I mean, I'm not going to win against them if it's just based on the skill level generally. And, you get to the top 4, which is definitely possible because, there's other places in there. There's a third and a fourth place. And then you get basically like 2 final matchups, the semifinal, for example, which is just one game where you can maybe make an upset happen and maybe win, even though, you maybe aren't the highest skilled player in the division. Most of the time, you're still not going to win, which is how it should be, because, most of the time the best players win, but sometimes a little bit of hope for the lesser skilled players is a good thing to have.
Yeah, I guess in a way it's sort of like this sort of format benefits more consistency over a long-term season.
Mm-hmm.
Because I will say that almost always at the end of a season, when I look at the people who get promoted, I'm like, oh yeah, they deserved it. And very rarely do I look at someone who gets promoted and I'm like, that probably shouldn't have happened. On the other hand, when I look at people who get relegated, a lot of the times I think, ooh, maybe they got a little bit unlucky. Mixed in with the whole, maybe they probably should have been relegated. So,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe I'm just an optimist, but it does feel like in the end, more people are deserving of promotion than can get promoted.
Yeah,
Which
that's
is why
yeah.
like that consistency being an extra factor, along with like the different skills you might be cultivating for different maps, might be an important thing to consider when when figuring out your prospects for the season.
Absolutely. And kind of in line with that consistency thing, like if you're always scoring around like 23,000 points, you might require that little bit of luck in your matchups to get all of those wins. But if you're always scoring 24,000 points, then maybe it matters less who you really get matched up to. So I think overall it's just kind of a matter of, you're gonna gravitate around the position you deserve most of the time. And of course you have those random random seasons where it's just all the bad luck gravitates to you, all the unfortunate matchups come your way, and you just happen to be further down than you deserve, or higher up than you deserve. But I feel like most of the time for most people it evens out roughly, and you might be in 8th when you would have deserved 6th, or you maybe only deserve 10th. But there is very rarely a situation where, you know, you are in last place and you would have deserved first. These kinds of things. Yeah, even, you know, especially with the bonus points as well now. Back in season 1, when that wasn't a thing, that can happen, and kind of almost did happen to me in season 1. But with the bonus points, you might not be first with the highest total score, but you're probably not going to be, you know, like 7 for 8 with it. All right, I think we've talked enough about this.
Yeah, honestly, in the like in the timestamps, just have like a little chunk in the Division.
Yeah,
4B.
I was planning on kind of like excluding that part a bit there, but let's look at their fixtures for next week. And
Yeah, where were we?
yeah, we were looking at the fixtures for Division 4B for next week, and we have some pretty interesting ones there. I think a lot of you know, fixtures that are kind of like players high up in the table against players further down. We do have Jake against Sheldon, though, which is kind of the, you know, I think they're 6th and 7th. So
Yeah.
very, very crucial for both of them. If they win this game, they've still got a good shot. If they lose, they are probably out of the promotion battle. So pretty high stakes there.
Yeah, that's absolutely an important one. I'm also looking at the Seppo versus Ollie match, both of whom are like sort of mid-high table, and this might be a significant factor in the chances for either of them and that promotion spot.
Yeah, definitely. Most of the other games kind of have one clear favorite. I think probably Mikpiet against Romy is the one with, you know, the least clear in that sense. But
Maybe, yeah.
yeah, we'll talk.
Solar versus Laban Greb, top of
Yeah.
the division versus bottom of the division, you know.
Yeah, Pashtetli against Jen Harrison, I think might be second against second last or something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's some symmetry going on.
Yeah. South America, though, we'll talk about it later, but pretty special, I guess, as a map, which can definitely throw some upsets in there with people who might not, you know, have the absolute highest skill level generally, but might be good at the continent. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see some upsets next week, but, you know, obviously you can never expect those. That's why they're called upsets. So we'll have to see what actually happens. Yeah. We'll look over into your division, Division 4A.
Fun.
And yeah, I mean, it seems like the week went well for you, didn't it?
Yeah, mostly because I think I got maybe a little bit lucky on that Sri Lanka plonk in round 3. There's I think maybe for the first time or like the second time in this division, multiple draws, just because as you were saying, it was a seed with like sort of one round that decided everything. I was actually curious about what would happen in the Hexalt versus Danny J game, because when I was scrolling through the results, I saw that they were like exactly 100 points apart. And I wasn't sure what the rules were there. Like I was wondering, like, is it only if it's within 100 points? But no, it looks like they've drawn as well, which really is good for me because it evens things out a bit at the top.
Yeah, isn't 100 points within 100 points? I would think so.
I don't know. Like the closed sets, open sets, math is hard.
Yeah. I don't actually know 100%, you know, specifically what the rules say. I'm pretty sure it is, you know, 100 points is still considered a draw, but I also think we've never had it before. So I'm going to have to look at that again just to make sure, you know, we're not doing anything wrong here and Hexal would have deserved the winner or something like that. But I'm pretty sure that's the way it works. It's the way it should work. Let me just say that. And if it's not that way in the rules, then I have to rephrase them. Yeah, biggest surprise here, probably Wakelock with just, you know, keeps going. Another win against Carp as well.
Yeah, Wigalog is on such a roll. It's honestly like kind of crazy to see that someone who maybe didn't have the highest expectation coming into the season is just doing so consistently well week after week. You know, taking down taking down Carp. Well, he took down me last week. Tied with Hexalt the week before, but getting a perfect score and thus getting 3 points as a result as well. So like Wakelock is doing really well, and I don't think Wakelock has secured promotion, but it's looking pretty good.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that in a second, but someone else is doing really well, this week at least, is Heyimini, who was the only one who managed to 25k this seed, you know, period. even with all the
Oh
other
yeah.
players across the divisions playing the seed.
Yeah, I'm like hats off to Air Yemeni for this one. Like that was a incredibly tough round. Like I can maybe see in the back of my mind how you might approach that, but like getting that perfect score in round 3 especially is just like, I applaud Air Yemeni for
Yeah,
that effort.
and as we look at the table, it was something he definitely needed as well, with those 4 points catapulting his way out of the relegation playoff spots. Um, yeah, making the whole division really close again. We've got a lot of close divisions this season, even after 7 weeks, where like Hedikme in ninth is still only 4 points away from Xander in third. So again, just 2 weeks for this division. But even after 7 weeks, it looks very open still. You know, you got Hexalt who's 4 points ahead of fourth at least. So, you know, talking about the promotion playoff spots, he should have that relatively secured. Also without a defeat so far. He's had 3 draws, but no losses yet, which is quite cool to see. But yeah, everything behind him, very close.
Yeah, like Hexalt is a beast. And we all knew that coming in, and he's showing it. And as mentioned, I'm like really impressed that Wakelock is doing so well. Uh, and it looks like uh at the start of the season, I was thinking, wouldn't it be fun if all 3 Americans were just like together at the top? Well, we're together.
Yep, that is true. Maybe not at the top, but close to it. I mean, it can happen. There's still 2 weeks to go.
Yeah. But like my thoughts on this table, I think I feel like I say this every week, but it still is kind of impossible to predict how this will shake up. Like, Air Yemeni and Zatomo like sort of hovering over the relegation spots, but like only a couple points behind potential promotion. Like Sebkirst and Adikmi, who um, uh, who are both like pretty good players in their own rights, like at the bottom, but still only a couple points away. Like, really, it feels like Danny J sort of was in my mind really the only potential constant coming in. But the fact that Danny J hasn't lost any of the last 2 matches at all, like even tying against Hexalt, which is wild, proves that Danny J still has some fight in them. It looks like.
Yeah, it might not be quite able to manage to stay in Division 4 for this season, but definitely someone to look at next season if he does get relegated to Division 5 and, chooses to continue there, at getting like at least a solid mid-table position there, because it was always going to be a little bit tricky for the Division 4 newcomers this season because there's only one for each side of the division, and always a bit tricky with preseason. Are the players really, are they good enough for that division? Are they maybe too good for that division? And it seems like this season, the Division 4 newcomers are struggling a little bit with it, but they're not super far off. They're just like that little bit off, and might be having a better time next season once they're accustomed to all of the features of Reddit League, the way everything works. But let's look at their games for next season. And I mean, speaking of Wakelock, he's up against Hedikme, so may very well manage to keep it going. Is also always a little bit in danger of like dropping a 10k on something like South America. Definitely possible, but it's looking good for him. And you also seem to be getting a relatively favorable matchup coming your way.
Well, that's what I thought in Virginia when I, an American, was against Adikmi, and then I got destroyed. So anything can happen. It looks like there's a pretty good mix of like sort of matchups that are pretty far apart in the table and matchups that are pretty close together. Like Karp versus Xander or Air Yemeni versus Sebkirst. These are going to be pretty important for like advancing forward up the table. Whereas there's a couple other matchups. Hexalt Atomo, Adikmi Wakelock that might be a little bit more one-sided or might have a bit of a favorite. But as I said, I can still see some upsets happening here.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, might be a very interesting week as well. Even the matchups where, as you said, someone relatively high up in the table against someone relatively far down could still lend themselves to some upsets this week. I could totally see those happen. But yeah, we'll see next week as we move on to the results for Division 3. And yeah, we finally have the first win for Freckles this week, and against Flipster as well, which, might not have been the game you would have expected him to do that.
Yeah, that's a big one. I was actually talking to Flipster afterwards, and he was like, "Yeah, I like did really well in the practice seeds." Like Flipster was also like the only other person other than Ariam to 25K the D4
Yeah.
seed, and comes into Division 3, and it's an unfortunate loss for Flipster, but it's a great win for Freckles, who still has a bit of work to do, I think. Spoiler alert, to get out of a relegation position, but um, you know, hopefully this can build up some momentum or disrupt the momentum that someone like Flipster is having.
Yeah, definitely. Also, very interesting draw there from Diesel against Tante. 27 points apart at around like 22,500 points, which you don't see too often. But generally, a lot of these games were very close, just separated by a few hundred, maybe 1,000 points. Apart from that, though, I don't think any of the results were particularly surprising outside of that Freckles game. Might also have to do with, kind of looking at those matchups. I think a lot of them were pretty even. Maybe Tante against Diesel is the biggest surprise outside of that.
Yeah, but I think you're right that like the fact that a lot of these are have pretty even scores in like like a pretty narrow distribution of scores in total as well, proves that this is perhaps a set of matchups that is a little close together, which probably means that they're pretty important as well. Looking back at the seed too, it looks like there was a pretty important landscape guess in Brazil that people sort of had to nail if they wanted a good chance, but it definitely didn't come down to that like D4 did.
Yeah. We'll take a look at the impact of that on the standings. And you were speaking of the Americans being close together in Division 4A. Look at the French here. Yeah, basically, I mean, from 6th down to 10th, even if Geoguessr is choosing the Bretagne flag, everyone close together. Now we just need the Germans to all huddle together. And I think the Italians are not going to happen. That's a little bit too big of a gap between Steel the Snick and Freckles, but yeah, again, I pretty much say it for every division, but it's another very close one with 2nd to 9th, just 5 points. Again, relegation, playoff, promotion, playoff, everything's still possible.
Yeah, it looks like perhaps unlike the other divisions that we've looked at so far, there is one person who is like pretty clearly in the lead here. The only undefeated person, Diesel. Uh, at 4 points ahead, the best anyone else can do is tie him in this next week. But there are a couple weeks left too. There's like what,
Yep.
4 games left. So there's lots of time for some people, even potentially in the lower parts of the bracket, to make their way up. Maybe we will see some more country sorting, as it were.
We could. I'm expecting it to get, thrown around a bit more than it is currently, but let's take a look at who they'll play next week. And we do have Diesel against Steel the Snick, which is first against second. So another pretty important matchup for, if Diesel can win this game, I think he's almost secured his promotion spot. Of course, not mathematically, but it's going to be really difficult for anyone to catch up with him at that point. And at the same time, yeah, Geoguessr against Freckles, another very important game further down the table to decide who will be in those relegation spots.
Yeah, speaking of mathematical oddities, how likely is it that there's 5 French players here and there's no derby this week?
Relatively unlikely. But
Unless I'm
statistically will happen at least once or twice a season.
Anyways. Yeah, like looks like there's some pretty tight matchups here. Diesel versus Steel is definitely one to watch out for. A couple other ones among people who are sort of in a similar area, like Geoguessr versus Freckles, and Flipster versus Antoine Pilote as well, I think. Although maybe not as close as I thought initially. But still though, like some pretty important matchups here, especially for people who want to sort of rise out of those bottom few spots. With people like Diesel and Steel the Snick and Paulinho all at the top being sort of distracted by other people who are sort of mid-table. This is a chance for some of those lower division players to maybe score some points that they might not be able to against some of the higher bracket players.
Yeah, Hugo against Nakira, I think, is very important in that regard as well. Hugo probably needs a win here if he really wants to get out of those, spots lower down in the table, currently in 11th with 6 points. It could be a very important matchup for him as well. As especially while I'm scrolling down here, his next game is against Diesel, so might as well get the points while he can, because it's not going to get easier.
You never know. And for what it's worth, Hugo being from South America, hopefully, is feeling maybe like there's a bit of a home advantage, or maybe he's feeling a bit of home pressure. People don't always perform well on their home maps.
Yep, definitely true. All right, let's look at Division 2 then and their results. And unfortunately, second red card of the division. I think Division 2 is just cursed in general. But yeah, unfortunately, Armand again did not play his game. So I guess there's no direct relegation from Division 2 anymore this season. So anyone in the lower half of the table can breathe a sigh of relief. And yeah, they're fine. And they can focus on, finishing off the season, in style. Maybe make a push for promotion. Can take a few more risks in some of those games because it's not like losing is going to cost them too much. And maybe because of that, we'll see some upsets in the coming weeks, which could be interesting. I think generally the results this week, probably most surprising, even though I think if you look at the table, it's not, it's two players who are relatively close to each other. I wouldn't have expected Ordboka to win against Verdok on a world map.
Yeah, that's a good point. Especially since they're before this, they would have been like 4 points apart too. It's a big gap on this table.
Mm. Other than that, I think Max finally getting another win against Samo T. He's been having a pretty rough season so far, so good to see him get some points on the board again. And Renata with a pretty weak week for her, with only 21,000 points, but Guelo struggling with that one quite a lot, and will give her the 3 points anyway.
Yeah, she got lucky.
Yep, definitely. And we'll look at the table, and with that luck, she remains. Well, she doesn't remain. She takes first place, ahead of Verdok now, and this may be one of the least close divisions, with a 3 point gap between fourth and fifth, and obviously, still 4 weeks to go, and there's a lot of red card matchups coming into play here, so maybe only 2 weeks left really for some of those players. I'll have to take a look at that for next week and see who's maybe favored by having some free points coming up. But yeah, looking at this, you've got the current top 4 who are looking pretty solid, and then you've got a bit of a gap. Then it all gets fairly close again, all the way down to WTF at the bottom in 10th currently.
Yeah, and honestly, the fact that there are 2 red cards here, like you were saying that people might be feeling a bit less pressure to do super well, might take some more risks. I wonder if people might be thinking ahead to whether they or whether their opponents might actually be facing off against some of these red cards later. Because, if you play a red card, it's an automatic 3 points, maybe even 4 points if you can 25k a seed. And that could mean a lot for a lot of people. Like there's nobody here for whom 4 points wouldn't jump them up at least 1 or 2 ranks here. So maybe people might not necessarily be taking as many risks, but people might be calculating a number of different things. Or on the other hand, people might just not be thinking about that at all and just playing as well as they can.
Yeah, it surely depends on the kind of person they are. But we'll take a look at the next week and see who is playing against them this week. And it's Renata and Ordboka who will be taking their guaranteed points. I'm also going to quickly scroll down. And okay, an interesting one. They are playing against each other in the last week, so no free points there, which Yeah, I mean that's a positive thing, I think, because it can, yeah, yeah. And I don't know
Yeah,
actually.
at
It
least
could be positive or negative. It could add
I don't know.
some interesting stuff in there too.
I think it leads to a more suspenseful climax to the season. No one's going to be going into their last match of the season and thinking, well, of the regular play season and thinking, oh yeah, that's some free points.
Mm, true, but it could also lead to some more pressure if it was that way, where fourth place is having a free game and third place needs to win their game because otherwise the person with the red card matchup is going to overtake them. But probably for everyone's sanity, it's better to have that in the last week.
Yeah. And
Um,
honestly, speaking of that kind of like consideration though, that means that this week in particular is going to be more important than ever for Wurdock and Stock, who are the only two people in that top four, that top tier that we were seeing, that actually need to do well in order to get some points this week, because both Renata and Ordboka are getting those free points, and they're both pretty far at the top of the table. So Wardock and Stock probably need a bit more luck than the others to stay in those positions.
Yeah, and it's not gonna be easy. I think Bubat so far hasn't had the worst of seasons, but he's maybe again been a bit unlucky with some of his games, some of his matchups potentially. Definitely not an easy opponent, and the same goes for Cameron, who's just been very busy with university and stuff like that, and is now though a bit more free, has a bit more free time, so might be able to practice South America a bit more. Obviously, with the position in the table, might be a question of does he have any motivation to do so when he's like 7 points behind the promotion playoff spots and has no danger in relegation. But we'll see. I mean, it's still possible to get up there, so maybe we'll see some surprises. Um, yeah, other than that, we got Max against Guelo, WTF against Samo. Some interesting games in terms of, having the mid-table players in Max and Samo maybe make another challenge for those promotion spots. But yeah, no bus. I'm done.
Yeah, there's just a lot of a lot of head-to-heads going on in that sort of like middle tier. So this week is going to be pretty important as well for them.
Yeah, so let's take a look at our final division this week and, well, every week, which is Division 1. And I am very happy about winning my game against Barry. It was a very interesting seed that started us off with a round in Lithuania, followed by a round in Virginia. Already kind of was thinking, okay, next round's going to be Argentina. Where could I be? But no, the rest
Yeah,
of
as I was playing it, I was literally like, is this literally like handpicked by like taller or whoever picks the D1C? Like, is this handpicked specifically to be like this time capsule thing?
no,
Um,
just random chance that put us there, and it then went off of that with I don't even remember what the other rounds were. I know the last round was in Brazil, but I can't remember rounds three. Thailand and something else. It can't have been that hard if I already forgot about it.
looks like an Ecuador round 4, but
Oh
most people did
yeah,
pretty well in
yeah,
there.
I remember.
It was on a long straight road, so very few, if any, 5Ks, but
Yeah,
lots of pretty good scores generally.
yeah. And when I played that seed, like I dropped like maybe 10, 12 points or so in the first 4 rounds and was feeling very good. And then Brazil came. And I don't know how some people did it because some people got very close on that. But I think the closest clue that when I looked at it afterwards was like 12 kilometers away, which I don't think you can get to within 3 minutes, but maybe you can, or maybe I missed something. But for me, it was just a landscape guess. So I was kind of thinking, okay, it's, rest of the rounds 1 to 4 aren't easy. I think the Lithuania one was pretty easy, but the rest of them weren't super easy. So I thought, okay, maybe he'll drop a couple points here or there, but it's gonna come down to Brazil, obviously. And he got like 4.5K in Brazil and dropped 2.5K in Virginia. Which I still don't know how that happened, but it did happen, and I'm happy about it happening.
Yeah, that is
yeah.
rough. It's a home round for Barry, and it's also like a round that in a place that people have practiced for this specific tournament.
Yep.
But hey, it's like you were saying, luck factors in sometimes. Sometimes there's upsets, and that makes things potentially a bit more interesting sometimes.
Yeah, looking at the other games this week, I don't think there was any other real upsets. You saw Mr. Blue winning against Total Radio, Nimrith beating Shumi, Bastel beating Basement, Pluki beating Mason. A few games that were kind of, relatively even, as it always is with this Division 1, but none really spring out where I would have said, okay, that was a real surprise. Except for, yeah, possibly my game. But yeah, looking at the table now, that puts me up into 7th, which is actually the first time I'm leaving the relegation spots this season.
Randy,
Which,
congratulations.
yeah, thank you. It's very nice. I was actually already thinking about. I actually have never finished mid-table in Reddit League in all of the previous 5 seasons. I've been in playoffs 4 times and I got direct promotion once. So this might be a first for me this season if I can pull that off and stay somewhere in that range of 5th to 7th, which is
Yeah, who needs a
difficult.
postseason?
Yeah,
That's true. There's a lot of good players.
and it is difficult as well to achieve in Division 1 because basically like 7 of the 10 spots do something. But I'll definitely take 5th to 7th over a relegation playoff. I've had enough of those, especially in such a stacked division as well, where it's you just know the relegation playoff is going to be really tough no matter who you play against. Yeah. Other than that, again, a very close division still, and you can kind of see everyone from 1st to 9th has some chance of finishing in the playoffs. Some of the people at the top, Barry and Mr. Blue, with only 2 weeks to go, a little bit more safe. If they get one more win, they're pretty much secured. If they maybe get like a point or two from like bonus points, they might also be safe. So they're in a pretty good position. But behind that, everything's still very close together. And especially if you look at the relegation fight as well, kind of from 4th down to 9th, just 4 points apart too.
Yeah, lots of like again, this is an incredibly stacked division, as you were saying. You can tell how close everyone is too, just from like looking at people's like win-loss ratios. Nobody has fewer than 2 defeats. And even like considering that, like everyone has like a pretty similar total points. I think there's a couple people maybe with a few more than others, but a lot of people are just in a very, very narrow range of like total points scored. A lot of people are in a very range of like total points throughout the season so far. So there's a lot that could shake things up in even these coming 2 weeks that'll close out the season for this division.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's look at the first of those weeks. And it had some very interesting games. I mean, the top 4 all playing against each other. Mr. Blue against Barry and Pluki against Bastel. And then at the bottom as well, I'm playing against Nimrith, which is a very crucial game. Not the week I would have wanted to play against Nimrith, but yeah. Basement against Totoradio, Shumi against Mason are probably the 2 games that are a little bit further apart, mostly like mid-table against relegation candidate. But yeah, definitely a week that's going to provide some very interesting results. And with those, some of those top of the table players against each other, could very well see us guarantee kind of like our first 2 guaranteed playoff spots come the end of the season.
Yeah, like it's definitely possible for some of these players to essentially just like mathematically clinch a playoff spot. As well as it's probably likely that somebody in this division, in this next week is going to potentially condemn themselves to a relegation spot as well, whether it's direct relegation or some kind of relegation playoff.
Yeah, Toto Radio essentially needs to win against Basement, or at least get like 2 points. Maybe if a bonus point and a draw would potentially be enough. But if he loses against Basement, he'll be at least 4 points behind a relegation playoff spot. And I mean, it's possible to get a 25k in South Africa next week, but I don't think it's going to be very likely. So it's kind of his last chance, really, to get out of that spot.
Yeah, for sure. This is going to be maybe the most like important match yet for Toto Radio, because this match determines whether or not they will get directly relegated or not.
Yep. So with that, let's talk about South Africa now. And oh, not South Africa, South America. They're so close
I was
together.
gonna say,
I mean, we
yeah.
can talk about South Africa if you want, but
Spoiler alert for next week.
no, let's talk about South America. And yeah, what do you think about the continent in general, and then maybe this map in particular, if you've played any of it at all yet?
Hmm. I think that South America is um honestly pretty fun to play because like it definitely has a lot of challenge. It doesn't have as many countries as Europe might, but it also doesn't have as much like meta and difference between the countries as Africa might, which we played, I believe, last season or maybe the season before that. But there's a lot of strategies you can use in South America that might limit where you are. Uh, and this map in particular, though, this map in particular is interesting because it's specifically an arbitrary South America. So it's a little bit similar to that AI Gen Argentina map that was chosen for the Argentina one, where the locations definitely aren't handpicked to be pinpointable in any way. They're sort of just picked to, I believe, map out a general distribution over the continent.
Mm.
Um, but the thing about this continent is that it's possible, and I'm not saying it's likely, but it's possible that like speaking the language might benefit you a bit more because like Spanish and Portuguese are basically the two languages that you'll encounter. Maybe there's going to be like a freak chance of a Curacao seed or something like that. But there's definitely going to be clues aplenty, but perhaps maybe a bit more that are accessible to those who might be able to like understand a bit more of what's being written around them, possibly.
Maybe. I can see where you're coming from with that. I think though, in most scenarios, the areas where you would really benefit from that are areas where you would otherwise find information anyway. I feel like the biggest problem in South America is that it's probably the continent that has the most, maybe if you exclude Australia, but the most remote locations where the likelihood of just encountering a location that's like, you know, further away from any civilization than you can get to in 3 or even 4 minutes is just quite high. So I feel
Yeah, we
like,
had enough of that in Argentina.
yeah, and I feel like we might get some more of that.
Oh no. Yeah, I guess that was
Maybe,
like sort of
maybe
like
not.
wishful thinking what would happen in like an urban South America map that will never be chosen.
Yeah. Uh, I don't know. Maybe something like that will be chosen next season, but not this map. Definitely not. You might encounter some cities for sure, but generally, just South America isn't the most densely populated continent. So if you just give it a random distribution, you're likely gonna be pretty rural most of the time. And yeah, I think there's definitely some interesting seeds that can be played here, and I'm expecting, well, I think the most fun seeds are going to be the ones where you've got like 5 locations that are all kind of difficult but not impossible to get. So the kind of rounds where you might be dropping 100 points here or there just because it's rural Brazil and you've got maybe an area code and nothing more. Maybe you've got a small town name but you can't find it, or like a state road but you can't find the exact one. And you just drop points here or there throughout the whole seed, but there's no round in there that's like, okay, you lose 3,000 points because you had no information. That's kind of like the most fun seeds in general, because I think that also always gives you that opportunity to kind of make up for not so great guess. Whereas, as we saw with like the D1 seed last week, or even the D4 seed last week, where you've got like 4 relatively easy rounds and 1 super difficult one where you can't really make up for that difficult round if you drop more points than your opponent there.
Yeah, that'll maybe be the most like the biggest difference between diverse AI world or like a general world map and this kind of map. It's just um a lot more punishing if it's around that you can't precisely 5k.
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely have some interesting seeds, I can promise that.
Oh no.
Not neither good nor bad. At least I'm not pointing either way here. I had fun creating them. That's all I'm gonna say. But yeah, I hope people will have fun playing them too. That's always it could be different. But yeah, for now, thank you everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you guys again next time. Till then, bye.
Bye. See ya.